Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Friday Farsight. I'm your host Sheldon Picotti, and this week's topic is Comprehensive Defense Against Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. This is probably not the most interesting topic for everybody. For me, it's probably more interesting because I grew up during the Cold War, and I have a hard time describing this to my kids and younger people. It really was a different mental model of the world. You really, in your mind, pictured two halves of the world, and nuclear war was a very present and believable danger. And it may actually be more likely today, but at the time it was more culturally built into your imagination. So I've always been interested in when we might have a good defense against a nuclear attack, partly for my own personal safety, but also for what it might mean for geopolitics. A while back, I was working on a sequel to a video game. I was working on Deus Ex 3, one of the iterations before the actual sequel came out from Eidos Montreal called Human Revolution. But an earlier version in the Ion Storm studio, we had the idea of missile defense becoming a reality, maybe through alien technology or some kind of a mysterious event that happened up in the Arctic. But anyway, one power gets this capability, and then it kicks off a whole series of events that sends the player around the world, solving big problems and causing the fate of nations to be upended depending on how you made your choices. Anyway, it's always seemed to me like a hugely dramatic development if it ever did come about. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at how it might come about and when and what it might mean. So now I'll hand it over to our AI hosts, Biff and Betty. Remember that this is AI-generated content, so don't trust it completely. Over to you, Biff.
Thanks, Sheldon. So this one, getting past all of the tech jargon and politics, are we talking about, the end of nuclear war?
Well, Biff, that's what this technology hopes to accomplish, at least for the country that develops it. It's a huge prediction for Friday Farsight this week. The prediction is that by 2055, plus or minus 15 years, a major power will have deployed a comprehensive defense system for intercontinental ballistic missiles. It won't exactly end the threat of a nuclear exchange, but for the first time in history, a large population, on the scale of a continent, will be largely protected.
So a space shield, basically, like what we've been hearing about for decades, since the early 80s. And Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, which, the press kind of mocked with the nickname Star Wars.
Well, the skeptics have been right that it's a huge challenge, but the prediction notes that several near-term advances could make the idea feasible. The list includes, space-based sensors, ground interceptors, directed energy weapons, and AI-powered battle management.
Right. Time for the technobabble. Is it really that different from the story in 1983 that, we just need a few advances and a ton of money? Just the money part could be a deal breaker if you ask me. What was the prediction, like $500 billion over 2 decades?
Astronomical figure, absolutely. But what makes this prediction so fascinating is how it connects current technological progress to this incredibly ambitious future. The article points out that deploying something this comprehensive is one of the most technically ambitious and geopolitically consequential military developments of the 21st century. It's easy to forget, but nuclear war is absolutely an existential threat, even to the biggest countries. And current systems like America's ground-based mid-course defense, the GMD, they offer limited protection. They've only got about a 50% success rate against single warheads in control tests.
Oh, so you're saying if a whole bunch of really fast, like hypersonic glide vehicles or ICBMs with multiple warheads came at us, we'd be, toast? Like those Avant-Garde or DF-41s?
Exactly. The challenge multiplies exponentially with those modern threats from Russia and China, respectively. So to get to this continent-scale defense, the Pentagon's Missile Defense Review highlights 3 critical breakthroughs. Persistent space-based sensing, which, makes sense. You got to see them coming from space. Then boost phase intercept capabilities, hitting them as they launch. And finally, advanced battle management systems, powered by AI, And what's interesting is that they're not just talking about these things abstractly. We already have programs like the Space Development Agency's Tracking Layer Constellation and the Missile Defense Agency's Next Generation Interceptor making incremental progress.
So the Lego pieces are coming together. And I guess the directed energy stuff is key. Lasers, like real Star Wars type lasers from space.
Real lasers, Biff. No joke this time around. The article emphasizes that directed energy weapons are crucial. Companies like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman are already demonstrating megawatt-class laser systems. We're talking Helios and IFPC-H. The thing is, for space-based deployment, you need massive power systems and thermal management. Boeing's 2024 study actually suggests space-based laser platforms could achieve the necessary power levels by 2045. That would enable those crucial speed-of-light intercepts during the boost phase, when ICBMs are like their most vulnerable. So the science is catching up.
Okay, so, we have the tech. The money might be there given this existential threat thing, but the story so far, it's a little too pat, don't you think? What about the flip side? What could, stop this thing dead in its tracks? I mean, besides, like, the national debt.
Well, that's where the economic and political realities really come into play. $500 billion is the low end of the likely cost. The Rand Corporation estimates between $800 billion and $1.2 trillion over 20 years. That dwarfs the Manhattan Project and the Apollo program. Know what I mean? So sustained political commitment across multiple electoral cycles is a massive challenge. We've seen missile defense programs funded on again, off again for decades.
Yeah, like you're trying to build the Great Wall of China, but you keep running out of rocks. You need a societal commitment to something like this. Which makes me wonder, actually, if the prediction's somewhat Western POV is, missing the scenario where an autocracy takes the lead here.
Well, the prediction doesn't get too specific about geopolitics, except to say that the first country to develop such defenses will likely be the United States, and that ongoing rivalry between the great powers is what will drive sustained progress.
Okay, the skies keep getting safer, at least in the US of A. No more fear of death from above, which presumably someone in the government is being paid to think about, while the rest of us play pickleball. But this fear, it's the foundation of the whole nuclear deterrence thing. Don't missile defenses kind of break the system? If one country can just bat away nukes, what happens then?
You're totally right to bring that up, Biff. Geopolitically, comprehensive missile defense really does threaten the foundation of nuclear deterrence theory. Analysts from the Carnegie Endowment observe that effective defense by one power incentivizes offensive countermeasures by others, potentially triggering expensive arms races. China's accelerated nuclear modernization, for example, is partly a response to U.S. missile defense developments, illustrating that dynamic perfectly. It becomes a bit of a cat-and-mouse game, really.
A cosmic game of whack-a-mole, but with, planet-ending consequences. And treaties? I'm guessing there's a lot of old paper that says no to this kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. The 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which the U.S. withdrew from in 2002, established a precedent for limiting defensive systems to preserve strategic stability. Current New START negotiations are increasingly addressing defensive systems alongside offensive weapons, suggesting future arms control regimes could constrain these comprehensive defenses. Even the European Space Agency is advocating for international frameworks governing space-based defensive systems before they become technically feasible.
So the world's like, hold on, guys. Let's talk this out before we start building a Death Star. I get it. That could slow things down maybe for the best if arms control becomes a thing again. But what about the actual technology? There are always doubters, right? Are there scientists saying it's all impossible because of physics? I mean, are we trying to violate the laws of the universe?
Well, not quite impossible, But the Union of Concerned Scientists, they argue that countermeasures will always outpace defensive systems. They cite the relative ease and low cost of deploying decoys versus interceptors. It's like the advantages of guerrilla fighters over conventional armies, or of millions of tweets over professional journalism. But, and this is where the optimism kicks in, emerging technologies like quantum radar and machine learning-based discrimination algorithms may shift this balance.
Quantum radar? What the heck is that?
Well, like the name implies, it's an experimental technology that makes use of, entangled particles. One signal is sent out as a probe, and the other, the idler, is kept at the receiver. This allows very precise detection of a reflected probe amid a lot of noise. Serious technical challenges remain, but if the technology can scale to longer distances and higher power levels, well, it could, at the least, detect today's stealth vehicles.
Rad.
And that's just one of the enabling technologies. The American Physical Society's 2023 review actually acknowledges that previous assessments about directed energy capabilities were overly pessimistic. Recent advances in fiber laser technology and space-based power systems have actually exceeded earlier projections. So while a perfect defense is, impossible, systems achieving 90% or more effectiveness against sophisticated attacks appear technically feasible by mid-century.
So it's not a perfect shield, but it's pretty close. Enough maybe such that the expectation is no longer, Armageddon. That itself is incredible. So if this thing actually goes online, what does it mean for us, for civilization? Does it end the threat of nuclear war, or does it just change the rules of the game?
It's a profound question, Biff, and the article suggests it fundamentally alters nuclear deterrence calculations. The most likely scenario is initial deployment by the U.S. around 2050-2055, driven by concerns about China's expanding nuclear arsenal and North Korea's advancing ICBM capabilities. So you're looking at the next-generation interceptor, the Space Force tracking constellations, and those first-generation space-based directed energy weapons all integrating together.
I get it. The tech is coming, but you didn't answer my question. Aren't we creating, a new kind of poker game where everyone has a better hand, but the stakes are still exactly the same? Or maybe even higher, if it encourages one side to think it can come out on top after a nuclear war.
Well, that's precisely the ongoing debate. The article stops short of predicting the exact ramifications for geopolitics.
I wonder what those countermeasures might look like, though. I mean, what about drone swarms? They totally overwhelm today's expensive missile defenses. Could drones carry nukes?
You'll probably need to run a war game to answer that question, Biff, or use the Strategic Farsight Scenario Builder. There's actually another prediction in the database about laser defenses countering threats like drones. What this week's article concludes is that ICBM defenses are probable by mid-century. While they face enormous technical, economic, and political challenges, the convergence of advancing technologies, growing nuclear threats, and shifting strategic priorities makes deployment by 2055 likely. It will fundamentally alter nuclear deterrence calculations and international security dynamics for decades to come. So, not necessarily the end of the threat, but a massive shift in how it's managed for sure.
Right, so we're building a cosmic bouncer, but the party still has a lot of rowdy guests. Still, I'd like to look at all this as, making nuclear war harder, at least more expensive, which we can hope then is a step toward making it impossible.
Absolutely, Biff. And that's all we have time for today on Friday Farsight. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And remember, you can explore this prediction and so many others on the Strategic Farsight website. We'll catch you next week.